Our scripture lesson this morning will be found in the book of Nehemiah in the 4th chapter, and we'll read the entire chapter. Hear now God's holy and inerrant word. But it so happened when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall that he was furious and very indignant and mocked the Jews. And he spoke before his brethren and the army of Samaria and said, "What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they fortify themselves? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they complete it in a day? Will they revive the stones from the heap of rubbish, stones that are burned?" Now Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him, and he said, "Whatever they build, if even a fox goes up on it, he will break down their stone wall. Hear, O God, for we are despised. Turn their reproach on their own heads, and give them as plunder to the land of captivity. Do not cover their iniquity, and do not let their sin be blotted out from before you, for they have provoked you to anger before the builders." So we built the wall, and the entire wall was joined together up to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. Now it happened when Sanballat, Tobiah, the Arabs, and the Ammonites, and the Ashdodites heard that the walls of Jerusalem were being restored and the gaps were beginning to be closed, that they became very angry. And all of them conspired together to come and attack Jerusalem and create confusion. Nevertheless, we made our prayer to our God, and because of them we set a watch against them day and night. Then Judah said, "The strength of the laborers is failing, and there is so much rubbish that we are not able to build the wall." And our adversaries said, "They will neither know nor see anything till we come into their midst and kill them and cause the work to cease." So it was when the Jews who dwelt near them came that they told us 10 times, "From whatever place you turn, they will be upon us." Therefore I positioned men behind the lower parts of the wall at the openings, and I set the people according to their families, with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And I looked and arose and said to the nobles, to the leaders, and to the rest of the people, "Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, great and awesome, and fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses." And it happened when our enemies heard that it was known to us, and that God had brought their plot to nothing, that all of us returned to the wall, everyone to his work. So it was from that time on that half of my servants worked at construction, while the other half held the spears, the shields, the bows, and wore armor. And the leaders were behind all the house of Judah. Those who built on the wall and those who carried burdens loaded themselves, so that with one hand they worked at construction, and with the other hand held a weapon. Every one of the builders had his sword girded at his side as he built, and the one who sounded the trumpet was beside me. And then I said to the nobles, the rulers, and the rest of the people, "The work is great and extensive, and we are separated far from one another on the wall. Wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us." So we labored in the work, and half the men held the spears from daybreak until the stars appeared. At the same time, I also said to the people, "Let each man and his servant stay at night in Jerusalem, that they may be our guard by night and working party by day." So neither I, my brethren, my servants, nor the men of the guard who followed me took off our clothes, except that everyone took them off for washing. Thank you. Thus far the reading of God's holy word. Please be seated. Well, this is an interesting passage. There are a lot of passages I could have selected for this message today. I titled the message, "The Right and Duty of Self-Defense." And it's obviously a question of our day. I was kind of provoked to give this message by one of our Baptist brothers that said that, that this is a big issue today and the churches are silent. Nobody's speaking about it. The pulpits are silent in large part. I'm sure that there are some. So anyway, I took that challenge and decided to do it. I've been studying this issue for over 30 years, but I've been working on this message since Tuesday. And now the problem is trying to narrow all the stuff that I've done since Tuesday down to one short message. So please know that we could make many messages out of this topic, but I'm going to try to give you highlights. So for those that are watching on video, forgive me, I have a cold, so if I dab my nose, I can't do better than the alternative. So anyway, this text of Nehemiah, I love this book, and Ezra and Nehemiah are two books that remind me of America today and the church today, because over the last decades, the walls have fallen down. Our country has been a steady encroachment in our country, our rights, our duties, our properties. The morality of our country that we used to have has largely been destroyed. The things that would be unthinkable even in my youth are put on television today, and it's a horrible thing that's going on in our country. The walls represent protection, and we used to have laws that protected us. Our laws largely mimicked God's laws. If God says homosexuality is wrong, our laws said sodomy is a crime, and if God says that murdering is wrong, then we put abortionists in prison, and now we protect them by law. So now the law, instead of doing us good and being a wall to protect us, now sometimes the law becomes actually hazardous to us. There's things that affect us as property owners, with all the green things that are going on to change the use of land and so forth, and protecting snails or something, and preventing farmers from owning and using and enjoying their land. So there's a lot of things that are going on today. But the book of Nehemiah is an example of you remember the context is that God's people had been judged by God, hauled away captive to Babylon, and now they're being permitted to return. And Nehemiah was ordained by the king of Babylon to come back, and he was given permission to rebuild the walls. And I can't go into this whole story, but you'll see that in Ezra and Nehemiah that the wicked do everything they can, from physically harming them, to filing lawsuits against them, to slandering them before the new king that comes. Everything that they can possibly do, they do to do what? To prevent God's people from building up the kingdom of God, to having their peace and their security, that they might worship God. You see, the people of God have no desire to do harm to anyone else. For us, you don't have to have a law that says thou shalt not kill, because Christians don't want to kill in the first place. It's like Paul said in 2 Timothy, that the law is for the wicked. It's not for you and I, but we have to have laws because we have to delineate the rules of society, and the civil magistrate is ordained and provided by God to use the sword to protect and to keep. So anyway, the walls have been torn down, and now these people have come back to Judea, to Jerusalem. However, the settlers that were there have become used to being in control. And I think we can see that in our country today too, that the people that are ruling everything from the State House in Illinois to the White House and to the Congress, that they are accustomed to rule, and the last thing they want to see is us stand. Not that we're a threat to them, we're only a threat to them calling the shots and their power and them telling us to do things that are wrong. So rather they have evil intentions toward us, we have none toward them. We would like to see them saved, we pray for them, and we'd like to see them and our whole nation return to our God. So in this book of Nehemiah, it should be obvious one thing, that these people were not a trained army. These were the settlers, these were the men, and every man was armed with a spear and a sword and a shield. And why did they have that? So that they could go kill people? No, it's for self-defense. And that's the reason that every human being has a right to defend themselves, their family, their children. You notice that Nehemiah says in verse 14, do not be afraid of them. That's rule number 1. And then remember the Lord, great and awesome. So we always want to keep in mind, don't be afraid of the enemies. Remember that if God is for me, who can be against me, right? He who is for us is greater than they who are in the world, or he who is in the world. Remember the Lord, great and awesome. And then the instruction, fight. For who? For your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. So this is not only an authorization to defend yourself, but it's also an authorization to be part of a community of effort for fathers to fight for their daughters, their brothers, their sisters, and even their property. So what did they do? They armed themselves, and of course they learned how to use their weapons. To bring up some of the silly arguments that we see today is, what kind of arms should they have? Should the bad guys have good swords, good spears, and so forth, and the good guys have, pop guns or rubber, little rubber swords or something like that? You see, to defend yourself means to use whatever is available that's the best that you can do to defend yourself. Again, not for offense, but only to defend against their others. They weren't out attacking others, but others were attacking them. And then they set about to build the walls and to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. And that's what we are. There's a ministry called Wall Builders. You might have heard of it. And it's all from Nehemiah. That's what we need to do, is build the walls. And other places in this book, it says that every man should build a wall closest to his house, in front of his house. So, what we tend to do is want to go to Washington and build a wall. But we need to build a wall in this county, in this township, and right where you are is where we need to, every man, go to work and to rebuild the structures that have fallen down. And of course, it only makes sense that wall that's right in front of me most affects me too. It most protects me, is that wall that's right in front. And as you see, they fought, they did their work, verse 17, with one hand they were laying rocks on the wall, with the other hand they had their sword in their hand. And that's again for us too. We need to, of course, defend ourselves, but our purpose is building the wall. Our purpose is to build. Defense is just a sad necessity, whether we defend ourselves legally in the courts. I mean, there's a lot of ways to defend yourself. Through prayer, there's a lot of ways to defend yourself, but we always want to keep in mind that the objective is to build, to glorify God, to build something up, to edify. Others tear down. We build up. It's the nature of the church. It's the nature of who we are. We're building up, and we're part of that heavenly city that will come down, the New Jerusalem. And we're living stones, as Peter says, in what God is building. So God is building up, and we are part of that he's building up. So in verse 14, again, we see that there's a militia here. America, the Second Amendment is about militia. And the question is, who's the militia? Today, we've destroyed the militia, and we have in its place the National Guard. But the National Guard is not a militia. It's an army unit. It might be under some control of the governor in each state, but it's not a militia. Let me tell you who the militia really is. The militia is 376 years old in America as of this last year. The Massachusetts Bay Colony was founded in 1630. Over 5,000 men, women, and children made the 2-month voyage to the New World, and leaving, of course, the comfort and safety of England behind. And obviously they saw a need for defense, defense against animals, defense against Indians, and of course against each other if need be. So what they did was they organized the militia it was a direct declaration on December 13th, 1636. And on this date, the Massachusetts General Court in Salem, for the first time in history of the North American continent, established, and listen to this, that all able-bodied men between the ages of 16 and 60 were required to join the militia. The north, the south, and the east regiments were established with this order. The decrees excluded ministers and judges, which are both ministers and judges, both magistrates, civil and ecclesiastical. Simply stated, citizen soldiers were mustered for military training and could and would be called up to fight when needed. So the militia, the posse comitatus, the militia is every able-bodied man. And now, when it says from 16 to 60, it wasn't that they put 16-year-olds into battle. In practice, that's when they started learning. They started gathering with the other men in the community to learn to use their weapons, to learn discipline, to learn, command structure, because they had, captains and as in the Old Testament, the leaders of tens and fifties and hundreds and thousands and so forth. So the militia is all the men. So therefore, all the men were ordered. It wasn't an option. They were ordered to do it. Why? Because of what it says in Nehemiah. Because every man has a duty to defend himself and his family and to join with others to defend the community, the neighborhood, and so forth. Tyrants really don't like militias. They like standing armies. And standing armies, if you read Blackstone's commentaries on the laws of England, which were used in the United States until about 100 years ago to train lawyers, but Blackstone and others hated the very idea of standing armies because, for one thing, professional soldiers don't have a lot of regard for personal rights and liberty because they've chosen a life without rights and liberty. They just do what they told, and especially back in that day. So in England, they didn't have standing armies, and we find that in a lot of other places. Even today, in Switzerland, there's no standing armies, but every able-bodied man is called into the militia. I think they do women too, by the way, but today. But anyway, they're called to learn to use their weapons, and I was reading recently that Hitler, if Hitler could have taken Switzerland, he would have had great wealth because Switzerland was full of gold and silver stashes, and it was a depository for the world's wealth, and it would have been able to buy Hitler all kinds of supplies that he needed. But the Swiss are all armed, and of course the territory is a little difficult too. It's all mountainous, but anyway, they decided, no, we're not going to go there. We'll go to France, we'll go to Poland, we'll go to Czechoslovakia, but leave the Swiss alone because they are all trained, and it would be a costly, long battle. It would have lasted too long, and so they decided not to do that. So the English had, the barons would be able to raise a force, and of course it was abused. Many times it's been abused, but mostly they didn't have a standing army. And America was never intended to have a standing army either. The Continental Army at the time of our Revolution was very small and very ineffective. Who were really effective were the militiamen that destroyed the English supply lines. They attacked them so that the English were stuck in their camps, because if they sent a column out to supply, the militiamen would attack the column, and from the bushes and everything, they didn't stand in big formations and march across fields to shoot at each other. So the militia was very, very effective in our war, but those men were all trained to be able to defend each other and themselves. The Proverbs has an interesting proverb. It's not part of my notes. It says that a neighbor close by is better than a brother far away. And there's a presumption there that the reason it's better to have a neighbor close by is because you can help each other. If you can help put out a fire, you can help if somebody's hurt or damaged in the field, working in the field. If there's an attack, a good neighbor is one who is willing and able to defend his neighbor. It's a mutual reliability that we should be good neighbors to our neighbors and be there to help them. So we have this National Guard that today that really is supposed to be a militia, and it's supposed to be everybody. This is true of Israel of old. Remember when Israel left Egypt, they left in their ranks by their tribes. But there was no standing army. Every man was trained to use his weapons, so that when they had conflict, the men were all trained to do that. So you don't have a separate standing army. You have each individual man that has a duty and a responsibility to fight for his wife, his children, his tribe, and of course in the end for God himself. So we have militias, we have a duty to build, and the interesting thing is that today we're using the wrong arguments, and we're using the wrong arguments on a lot of things. I think those of us that followed the last political campaign for the White House, noticed that they didn't bring up the right arguments. They weren't talking about the right subjects. The debates were all out here in left field, and nobody really got down to things like debt and war and abortion and all these things that should be talked about that were ignored by the people that run everything. But today, people are arguing about what size gun you should have, how many bullets it should have, whether this is about hunting rights, or, so all these arguments, if you listen to them on television and listen to the president talk, they're not talking about the true issues, and we want to go to the foundation. Self-defense is a fundamental right that I believe everybody really believes in. If you were being attacked, one of you ladies, and some mugger or bad guy or rapist was attacking you, you would scream. And if somebody was close by, you would want us to come to your aid, would you not? And would you want them to be effective in aiding you? Not just say, I'm going to pray for you, brother. I'm going to pray for you, sister. No, bring a club, bring a gun, bring whatever you can. Spare me, save my life. And the biggest liberal in the world, if he was being choked or under attack, I think he would scream, help, right? Am I wrong on that? When it's you, when somebody says, well, I don't care if I die, well, let me hold your mouth for a while. And see if you don't start resisting, and see if you don't want to cling to life. So everybody really believes in the right to self-defense. In fact, this is kind of crazy, we believe that animals have a right to self-defense. Who says that a mother bear shouldn't use the best weapon she has, her teeth and her claws, to defend her cub? Nobody. But from the view of some people today, we should pull her teeth out and pull her claws out, because those are dangerous. Those are weapons that can be used dangerously. Another thing that just amazes me is that the same liberals that want you to be defenseless insist that we protect grizzly bears, polar bears. We can't build pipelines or oil wells or anything because it might affect those polar bears that are up there. And these are vicious animals. They eat seals. They like to protect seals. Polar bears are dying on seals. They want wolves, restored. Here, I don't know about Illinois, but in Wisconsin, they're sticking wolves in Wisconsin, which are predators, and yet the liberals want to protect these wolves, but they don't think that we should be protected at all. It's an amazing, illogical situation, at least in my view. So liberals would have us believe that passing a law prohibiting the wicked from preying on their neighbors would change the leopard spot. That if we just make a law that says nobody can have a gun, then nobody will have a gun, and then there will be peace and joy and happiness, and the world will be one big, nice place. But the truth is that the wicked in Nehemiah's day and the wicked in our day are not at all interested in what laws we pass, and laws do not prevent crimes from happening. It just codifies the crime. So we have this duty to defend ourselves, and it's frustrating that we're dealing with all these wrong issues. People today, even Christians, are likely to say that the right to self-defense comes from the Second Amendment. Have you heard that? It's a very common thing. If you ask the typical person on the street, where do you get the right to bear arms? They'll say, I got it from the Second Amendment. That's not true. The Second Amendment didn't grant any rights at all. The Second Amendment prohibited the government from infringing upon your inalienable right to self-defense. The right to self-defense, you see, first off, if I might explain, government cannot give you any rights. Government doesn't possess rights. Only humans possess rights. Does that make sense to you? Only human beings are granted rights by God. And corresponding duties, I might add. You know, I have a right to life, and I have a right to defend my life. I have a duty to protect your life if I can be of some assistance to you, and I have a duty not to harm you or to hurt you in any way. And so government has no rights to give. The only thing that the government can give are privileges. And that's what they would like to put this issue down, is to a privilege. One of the ways you know it's a privilege is because they license it. And anything that is licensed, let me give you a definition, a legal definition of license. A license is a permission granted by a higher authority to do that which would otherwise be unlawful, illegal, a tort, or a trespass. That's what a license is. So when you see the government wanting to give you a license to do something, what they're saying is, we're going to give you permission to do something that you have no right to do without us granting you permission. So they, of course, what do they license today? Everything from your pooch to your car, to your right to travel, everything is licensed. Government likes to license things because whoever gives the license is obviously the senior and can control and regulate that license. So rights don't come from government. Government can only give privileges. So they can say, you can do this, trade unions can do this, and other people can do that, and no, you can't, you can, and so forth. They can give privileges, but they cannot give rights. They have a duty to protect rights, to defend rights. That's what Romans 13 is all about. The civil magistrate has a sword. Why? To keep peace, to keep your rights, to live a happy life. God has ordained government and given them power, given them the sword. Let's go to the true source of rights. And this issue is really an important issue. Let's go to the Declaration of Independence, because arguments today, we need to argue about the source of rights and duties, and we're arguing on the wrong ground, claiming that we get our rights to bear arms from the Constitution. The Second Amendment only prevents government from infringing upon an inalienable right. Let me quote briefly from the Declaration of Independence. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind require that they should declare the cause which impels them to the separation. And now the famous passage. We hold these truths to be self-evident. These are self-evident. That all men are created, I have circled, created. All men are created equal. In other words, we didn't evolve. We were created by a creator, by God. And God gives us our rights. We are created equal, and that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. Unalienable means that you cannot diminish it, you cannot take it away. In the middle of the word unalienable, we have the word lien. You know, you can have a lien on your property, and if you have a lien on your property, then you don't have full ownership or control of your property until you can get rid of that lien. Well, these rights that we have are unlienable, okay? They're unalienable rights. And that among these are life, and by the way, you can't have a right to life without a right to defend your life, right? Are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. It's a right that we have, not a privilege, not a license, it's a right. So the purpose of government is not to feed you, it's not to take care of you from cradle to grave. The purpose of the government is to secure these rights. That's what the Declaration says. And what rights are they? They're rights that are unalienable, and where did they come from? They came from God. So we're arguing today, most people, you turn on Fox News or whatever, and they're all arguing about what the government should allow you to do and where you get the rights and what does it really mean. And, well, sure, you can have a gun, but not an automatic gun or not a semi-automatic gun. You can't have more than 6 bullets or 10 bullets and all of these things that they're arguing over. And Christians are going, oh, yeah, you know, we're involved in the wrong arguments all the time. There's something that's really interesting. I don't think you'd have ever guessed I would have gone here, although some of you might, that this issue really goes to evolution versus creation. Because when you believe in creation, which obviously the Declaration of Independence endorses that we were created by God, not by government, and our rights come from God, and the government was just instituted to secure those God-given rights. The government can't take them away because the government didn't give them to us, and the government doesn't hold those rights. See, you can take away a license. If I have a driver's license and I get drunk and drive, they can take my license away. But there are other rights that are inalienable. They're not granted by government. They're only secured by government. So we have the government would really like to disarm us. But let me talk about this creation versus evolution. The Declaration says we are created. Evolution said we evolved from nothing through chance and random choices and chance. And evolution is all about the survival of the fittest and the law of the jungle. And that's what's going on in our government today, is that our president, as an example, believes that the fact that he was elected gives him a mandate and the power to do whatever it is that he wants. He really believes that he knows what's best and that he has the support, even though much of it is corrupt, as we might guess. But nonetheless, when you think from an evolutionary model, might makes right. I mean, it's all about power. It's all about the lion more powerful than the lamb. You know, it's all about the fox is stronger than the rabbit, so the fox eats the rabbit. It's all about power and the accumulation of power. So that's why one of the founding fathers, I forgot which one it was, said that if we should discover that there is no God, it would be necessary for us to invent one. It was Voltaire. I think Voltaire said that. But you see, the point is that without God, there's no moral compass of right and wrong, no objective standard of right and wrong, and it's every man doing what's right in his own eyes if he can get enough support. And it means that those that are in the minority are always under threat. So you see how evolutionary thought comes into this. I've heard so many people misstate that our country went downhill in 1963 when they took prayer out of school. That's patently false. If you want to talk about the schools, it started with not John Dewey. He was later I got it down here. Horace Mann. Horace Mann, clear back in the 1830s, he wanted public schools funded by the people, right? And he wanted public schools specifically because he hated Christ. And he hated Christian schools and Christian education. And he wanted to get all of our little kiddies into his schools to indoctrinate them. So it started then, and it's continued from there. Now, these guys take a long-term view. They don't try to do everything at once. They're willing to, because Satan's their God, they're willing to take a long-term view. But public education has raised generations of people on an evolutionary model, and government schools are not going to teach students how to control government. They're not going to teach you your true rights or where your rights come from. It's godless. And it's not just that it's neutral, it's anti-God. It teaches evolution, that you're an accident in history, that you weren't made with a purpose, that you weren't wonderfully made by a God that created you and sustains you, but that you're just an accident. And accidents you can kill. It affects the abortion issue, right? Because the mother is the strongest, and the mother can say, baby's got to go. Right? If you have a creation view, you say, that baby is a creation of God. I'm the host of that child. It's in my womb, and I must protect it. As a matter of fact, my view of it is that it's a gift from God. And yet, on the other hand, if you have an evolutionary view, it's the strongest survives, so the baby can go. So public education has been a problem for us, that we have a whole nation that's been trained to think that government can do what it wants to do, and that it's only a democratic vote. If you vote for Obama, then you get what you get. If you vote for Bush, you get what you get, and there's no check and balance anymore, so that everybody ignores the Constitution with a couple of very minor exceptions. So we're told that we need not be armed, that the police, or just say the government, that the government should have weapons and the right to use them, but we should not. That's the view. Am I making this up? They think the government should have a gun, and therefore you don't need one. That the government has a right to use guns. Our current president believes that he can use drones to assassinate even Americans. Even Americans. And by the way, he cries about 22 children being killed in Connecticut, but he's killed over 200 children in drone strikes. And they weren't terrorists. They might have been related. They might have been at a birthday party and a terrorist was there. But over 200 children have been killed by our president, so he cries crocodile tears over the death of children, but he doesn't seem to mind that. Dropping bombs and rockets on houses with people. Now, I don't have a problem with killing bad guys per se, but I'm just saying that those shooting rockets at people, there's innocent blood must not be shed. There's collateral damage being kept to a minimum. Whoever said that? We're not to kill anybody. We're not to murder. Thou shalt not murder. So we have this idea that the police should have guns, and I want to talk to you about this. The government. Let's go back to the basics of government. There's a book that you might want to get that's very short. It's by Bastiat, a Frenchman, B-A-S-T-I-O-T, I believe, and it's just called The Law by Bastiat. And in it he talks about the foundation of the ability to defend and for government to get its power. And if I might just use an example, let's say that we lived in the Wild West in the 1860s or 70s. And we were farmers and homesteaders out there, and there was nobody there when we got there, and then some other families moved in. And we understood, intrinsically, that each of us had a duty and a right to protect ourselves, and our wife, and our children, and so forth. And then we got some neighbors, and we tried to protect each other. And we helped each other out if there was a fire or Indian attack or whatever the case might be. But we had, get this, our right to defend ourselves and to protect ourselves and to use weapons to do that was inherent. It's an inalienable right that's natural in every creature, every animal that has a right to defend itself, to fight or flight. Nobody thinks that animals shouldn't resist when another animal's trying to eat them. It's just common sense. We're talking about common sense. So now we get half a dozen farmers, or maybe we got 20 farmers together, and we say, you know what, we could probably afford to hire one guy. We'll elect one guy, we'll make him the sheriff, and we will have him be on duty all the time, looking for that chicken thief that got my chickens, looking for the cow thief that got your cow, and the sheriff will be out full time trying to restrain evil and to protect us and so forth. Now, let me ask, the sheriff is authorized to arrest people and to shoot, but where did the sheriff get his right to have a weapon and to use that weapon? It was delegated, wasn't it? We delegated our right to self-defense to John Wayne, and we said, John, you're our full-time guy, we're going to give you $30 silver a month, and your job is to keep the peace here in town. But he didn't have some new right that came out of nowhere, he only had our right. So now this gets lost when you have police departments that are not elected and police chiefs that are not elected, and back to our county sheriffs, if we could raise up godly sheriffs. But I just want you to see that the government doesn't have any right to use force that they didn't get from we the people. We the people establish government, and we the people give the government our delegated authority to protect and defend. We give judges our delegated authority to judge cases of right and wrong and evil and so forth. And we give representatives, elected officials, the right to establish laws in our behalf. But they have no inherent right of their own. So God, of course, as I quoted in Romans 13, ordains that we would have magistrates, and the magistrates are not to punish evil, but to punish, not to punish good, but to punish evil. That's their duty before God. And so there's no power that does not reside with we the people. That's why we have the right to throw off government if we find that it's harmful to our rights. Now, there's another thing that's really important, and that is that the police, and most people don't know this, the police have no duty or obligation to protect you or to defend you. And that's not me saying it, that's the Supreme Court. In the Warren case in Delaware in 1981, actually the case started in 1975. Let me tell you what happened. This is really an unbelievable thing. There was a lady and her daughter that lived together in an apartment building in Washington, D.C. And this bad guys broke into the apartment. They raped and sodomized her, and she screamed and she yelled for help. And there were two ladies that lived on the third floor above her in an apartment. They called the police. The police dispatcher dispatched the police. The police came to the door of the house and knocked on the door. And of course she was being restrained, and so she couldn't say anything, and therefore the police, 4 police cars came. They knocked on the door, they walked around the house, and they left. They left. So the two ladies upstairs now, they climb out on the roof of a house from their apartment window. They call the police a second time. 3 times the police were called. The second time, the dispatcher didn't even dispatch the police at all. Made a report, I don't know, got busy, took another call, forgot. The police never came. And then they discovered the 2 ladies upstairs, and so they also went to their apartment, and for 14 hours, these guys abused these women. 14 hours. Police were called 3 times. Didn't try to force entry. They would if they thought you had a marijuana cigarette or something, but rape and things like that. So, naturally, this lady named Warren sued the police. And the Supreme Court ruled that the police have no duty. Basically, the Supreme Court ruled that the police are not obligated or have any duty to the victim of criminal acts. The main function of the police department is to arrest criminals, to investigate crimes. Obviously, if the police could have arrived, and if they had have arrived, that would be good. But the problem is that they have no duty to do that, so that you could sue them for failing to do their duty. The truth is, it's like I saw a joke the other day that said, I'd rather have a gun in my hand than the police on the phone. Because the one is immediate to protect yourself, and the other is a hope that somebody gets there. Police almost never prevent crimes. They don't prevent bank robberies or rapes or robberies. And God bless them. I'm not criticizing them. I'm saying they get there as soon as they can in most cases. But it's like the fire department doesn't prevent your house from catching on fire. Hopefully they'll get there before it burns to the ground. So the police have, according to the Supreme Court, 1981 decision, 4-3 decision, that the police were not negligible, not the dispatcher, that you cannot sue them for that, because the police, you can't sue the police and say, listen, my house was burglarized and I'm paying you to be a cop and you should have prevented it. They can't. They can't do it. So the courts say we're not going to hold them responsible, even in this drastic case. So if you think that the answer is that you don't need to defend yourself because the police are here to do that, the court even says they don't have a duty to do that. If they show up, fine. What they mostly do is investigate after the fact. But I just heard that, I think it was Chicago, but someplace, the police have said that they won't even come out and do a report for burglaries anymore because they don't have the staff to do that. Does anybody read that? It was Chicago. Yeah, so if somebody breaks into your house, steals your stuff, cops won't even come out and investigate that. It's an amazing thing. And So another thing, let's talk about the issue of pacifism. For many years there have been those that are pacifists. This particularly grew in the days of the Reformation with the Anabaptists. And the Anabaptists had, not all, but most, the Anabaptists that have later become the Mennonites and the Amish come from the Anabaptist roots. And as you probably know, they don't believe in war, they don't believe in weapons and so forth. And of course the Jehovah's Witnesses hold to that same kind of a view. But in the scriptures that they use, of course, are the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not kill, which should be murder, okay? Because the scripture commands us to kill. They're capital crimes. So therefore, thou shalt not kill. And they also use Jesus' admonition in Matthew 5 to turn the other cheek. Thou shalt not kill, again, we can tell from other passages of scripture that Jesus did not mean thou shalt not kill anything or anybody at any time. On the other hand, on the Matthew 5, 38 through 39, Jesus is talking about retaliation. And he's talking about, when somebody slaps you on the cheek, that is not trying to kill you. It's insulting you. It's doing something nasty to you. And he says, turn the other cheek. Don't strike back. Why? Because God avenges. Let God take care of these things. On the other hand, if somebody's trying to stab you with a sword, then that's a different kind of a thing, or shoot you with a gun, or choke you to death, or whatever. And so the pacifist position is really unsupportable by Scripture, and those guys made a lot of mistakes, the Anabaptists, and that was just one of them. The other thing is to fight or to flight. In the days of the destruction of Jerusalem, Jesus had already warned the people that when you see these things coming, flee, okay? And the Christians did. They fled to the hills, they fled to the mountains. That's where we get the phrase, run to the hills, That's because of that passage. And so when Titus's army came to surround Jerusalem, the Jews used common logic, which is to pull into the walled city and defend yourself. They perished. They either died, starved to death, were killed by the sword, or were carried away captive to Rome, where they built the Colosseum with the money from the temple and all that. But the Christians were spared. They were spared because they listened to Jesus. They got the word, and so sometimes we flee. If you can flee, somebody trying to harm you, that's good. Don't want to kill somebody if there's any possible way to not do that. But there are other times that we cannot flee, that we must stand. Look at in Jonathan let me see. In 1 Samuel 14, 1 Samuel 14, I'm going to abbreviate the story and just read a couple of verses, but the case was that Saul, Jonathan's father, declared a fast. Nobody can eat anything, and if they do, they'll be put to death. Jonathan didn't get the word because he was out doing his job fighting, and Jonathan ate some honey. And when it was reported to Saul, then in verse 44, Saul answered, God so do, and more also, for you shall surely die, Jonathan. But the people said to Saul, shall Jonathan die, who has accomplished this great deliverance in Israel? Certainly not. As the Lord lives, not one hair of his head shall fall to the ground, for he has worked with God this day. So the people rescued Jonathan so that he did not die. This is called interposition. This is because the people said, Mr. Magistrate, we will not permit you to do this injustice, this wrong. Another passage that I like is found in Proverbs 24. If you turn to Proverbs 24, Proverbs 24 verses 11 and 12. This is another case of interposition. in our duty to defend life. And I read, deliver those, some versions like the NIV I believe says rescue those. Deliver those who are drawn toward death and hold back those who are stumbling to the slaughter. And if you say, think about this in relationship to abortion clinics, if you say, surely we did not know this, does not he who weighs the heart consider it? He who keeps your soul, does he not know it? And will he not render to each man according to his deeds? This blood guilt we have is upon our whole society. And the church is largely silent and will not stand and decry this. It goes on. Thousands murdered every single day. So there's another passage. If I should have gone there while I was back in 1 Samuel. If you want to go back to 1 Samuel again and look at chapter 13, verse 19, and here you'll see gun control. Okay, so if you want to put this down under gun control. It says there, now there was no blacksmith to be found throughout all the land of Israel, for the Philistines said, lest the Hebrews make swords or spears. You know, one of the things that they did was they got rid of all the blacksmiths. And if you read the rest of the story, and the story of Gideon, you realize that the people had to go down to the Philistines to have their tools sharpened because they wouldn't let them have any blacksmiths. Why? Because they didn't want the blacksmiths to make swords. And so this is disarmament. Today they want to get rid of gun companies, they want to get rid of certain weapons and so forth. But there's a purpose for this, and the purpose is to disarm us because, and I'm paraphrasing the scripture, scripture says God knows the plans he has for us to do us good, Well, tyrants know the plans that they have for us too. And that's why they want your weapons, because weapons interfere with their plans. Every time in history you see the Chinese disarm their people, the Germans disarm their people, disarmament always precedes a slaughter, the slaughter of the people. They know the plans they have for us, and you having a weapon is not conducive to their plans. So, what kind of weapons should we have? And this is, again, just common sense. The weapons that they had in Israel's day were the best weapons that they could have. You don't say, well, you're a good guy, so you can have a very short sword, and the bad guys can have a really long sword. That's foolish. What kind of weapons did we use against King George? Which, by the way, he tried to take the weapons away. It's how everything really got started at that first battle at Concord, tried to take away the weapons. What kind of weapons did the men use? The best that they could have. As a matter of fact, they had better weapons because they brought in rifles. The English soldiers had these muskets that were very inaccurate. You couldn't hit anything with those. But our guys had squirrel guns, rifled barrels, and they could hide behind a log and shoot a captain off his horse 200 yards away. And so you might say that we had better weapons, that the people were equipped better than the soldiers of King George. So there's this argument today that you should only have, you can have a weapon, basically what you should be able to have is a hunting gun, because they think that that's what the Second Amendment is all about. It has nothing to do with that. The Second Amendment is all about defense. Self-defense. If you shoot a squirrel, wonderful, but that's not what the Second Amendment is all about. It's all about your ability to defend yourself. So you should be able to have whatever weapon would make you equal to the threat that comes against you. Remember, as Christians, we are passive toward others. We're not on the offense. We don't want to shoot and rob and kill. We don't want to take people's property away from them. Although I got to admit that there's a lot of Christians today that are in favor of all these unlawful wars that we're engaged in around, saber-rattling Christians that I don't quite fully understand where they come off with this, but we should defend ourselves. We shouldn't be the cop of the whole world. That's a misuse of weapons. So what kind of weapons we should have? It's whatever will be able to defend us from the cases that come. So let's close with this. Let's go back again to Nehemiah 4 and just hear God's word. It's a good read if you want to read Ezra and Nehemiah. It's wonderful to show that even a pagan king can authorize, God can use a pagan king to authorize the building of God's house. So I'm going to start with, in the middle here, verse 14. Do not be afraid of them. Brothers, it is a terrible thing for us to fear men. Jesus said, do not fear men. And yet fear is rampant in the church today. We're afraid of everything. Afraid of losing our tax-exempt status. Afraid of you name it. We're afraid of it. We fear men. Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, great and awesome. And fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. Today, we haven't had to do that. The day may come when we do. But that's speaking of government. But the day might come at any time when some bad guy would break into your house, like these poor ladies in Washington, D.C. 1 minute they're sitting there watching television or whatever, reading a book, enjoying peace, and the next minute, bang, the door crashes in, and for the next 14 hours they're assaulted, and no cops come even though they're called. So this is a serious business, and today it's a big issue. So that's the reason I'm bringing it up. Let it not be said that this pulpit doesn't speak to the things that concern us, because there's a real threat for us today, and I want us to have this. So remember the Lord, great and great and awesome, and fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. Let us pray. Father in heaven, thank you for your word. Thank you for speaking to us through your word. And we pray, Father, that you give us wisdom and discernment. We pray that we might be peaceable, that as much as it be within us, that we might be at peace with all men, that we might be peacemakers, that we might invoke peace, that we might teach peace and endorse peace and demonstrate peace. And yet, Father, help us to be wise as serpents, and if we're to be harmless, help us to be wise, that we might know what we should do. We pray for our government. We pray for the church, Father, that you would raise up the church. Pray that you'd raise up pastors that will speak your truth and warn your people. For these things we pray in Jesus' name.